Thank you. AGOHA BASIL, Associate Professor of Architecture at the Department of Architecture, Chukwuemeka University, Anambra State, Nigeria. My seminar is on the African traditional community squares as an expression of communal lifestyle of the African in artistic form, the case study of Owerri Capital Territory. Introduction. Community squares are public open spaces that are transmitted from generation to generation, in which the Africans do a lot of socio-cultural activities, economic activities, religious activities, and environmental activities. Specifically, community squares have hierarchy from family, kindred, village, and community. The elements of community squares are footpaths, streams, water bodies, ponds, tree places, flood routes, artificial ponds, systems, religious sites, crafts, artifacts, and other socioeconomic entities. Even at times I have technological and crafts activities. Due to the influence of the Europeans, at the coming of the Europeans, the community squares, especially those with forest areas, were donated to the early missionaries, and they used those places as schools, hospitals, health centers, and did a lot of formal planning. The seminar is to highlight the Afro-European relation on the traditional community squares. The objectives are to identify some traditional community squares in Owerri Capital Territory. 2, to examine the extent of environmental transformation of these community squares since the coming of the Europeans. Another one is to assess the socioeconomic values or effects of these traditional squares ever since. Hypothesis. Hypothesis 1, there is no traditional community squares in Owerri Capital Territory. Hypothesis 2, there is no environmental transformation of the community squares in Owerri Capital Territory. Hypothesis 3, there are no socio-economic values or effects of traditional community squares in Owerri Capital Territory. The study area is Owerri Capital Territory, and the Owerri Capital Territory comprises 7 local government areas of Owerri Municipal, Owerri North, Owerri West, some parts of Mbitoli, Bombise, and Ikeduru. 4 local governments were randomly selected, and out of the 4 local governments, 13 community squares were selected. Literature review. Traditional community squares evolve are informal open spaces that evolve from generation to generation into public open spaces. They are inclusive and accommodate all ages, activities, and other socioeconomic and sociocultural issues. They also have recreational potentials where recreational activities, both passive and active, take place. Infrastructurally, the community squares are planned even from the traditional concepts, where have axial principles. There are also concentric principles. There are and other planning theories are found in community squares. Theoretical framework. The community squares are concentric in orientation, and so when Owerri Capital Territory was being planned, by Fingerhut, the concentric circle theory or principle was used, in which case the Owerri Capital Territory has both internal tangent and external tangent that define the routes, while the internal tangents at 10 kilometer radius from Owerri Amajeke Post Office, General Post Office. The external tangent is at 20 kilometers radius from the same point. The scope of the study includes locating and the community squares and trying to ascertain their conditions, the environmental issues such as open spaces, forest areas, tree places, socioeconomic activities such as markets, residential areas, crafts and tree places. Methodology of the research. There were about in Owerri Capital Territory. Randomly, 13 of them were selected, and using GPS and GIS, the actual locations and sizes were determined. 390 questionnaires were also distributed to respondents so as to extract some information and data from the people. Discussion, presentation, and analysis of the data. The data on location of the community squares in suburbs, in urban areas and rural areas were determined. Table 2, place 1, 2, and fig 4 actually shows this, and figure 6 also. Hence, the community squares in the rural areas that have not been tampered with provide great opportunity for updates and development of the community squares into modern recreational centers. Environmental activities, formal planning that tries to identify the principles, the traditional principles of concentricity, the issue of axiality, the issue of cul-de-sac were also explored. Thus, reducing the theory of ethnocentricity in planning and reinforcing the fact that planning is not only multicultural but interdisciplinary in nature. Socioeconomic activities such as mixed use activities, interplay of indoor and outdoor spaces are also studied, in which case activities such as recreational, indoor recreational, passive and active recreational activities were also part and parcel of the lifestyle of the people. Recommendations. Traditional community squares. The study discovered that traditional community squares exist in the Owerri Capital Territory and are spread across the urban area, the suburban area, semi-urban area, and rural areas. While those in the urban areas have been tampered with and some decimated, those in suburban and semi-urban areas and rural areas are actually intact and provide opportunity for upgrades and development of recreational areas and modern recreational areas and squares. The traditional community squares also are organizing units for planning. Thus, community settlements, recreational activities are part and parcel of the community squares. And so, the community squares provide opportunity for integration of informal planning activities into formal planning activities, and so could be a very big contribution to planning theories if they are actually integrated. Number 3, advocacy. It is also advocated that there is a need to encourage community participation, local and foreign organizations and NGOs to partner in the development of these traditional community squares. Conclusion: since most of the community squares are yet to be properly developed and actually to be upgraded into modern recreational centers, it is very necessary that a spatial distribution of these community squares be undertaken as a further research, so as to know actually those to be upgraded and further developed. It is also recommended that it is necessary that there should be a partnership between the government, the communities, NGOs, and local organizations and international organizations, especially European organizations, in the development and preservation of the elements and components of these community squares, so as to actually continue to strengthen the relation between the European and African people, especially those in Nigeria. It is also necessary that places like the Shell Camp in Owerri, places like the Otamiri Stream and Otamiri River and or some other water bodies be preserved and integrated into the urban milieu. Thank you for listening.